plugin flaw exposed 4 million WordPress websites to takeover. Tracked as CVE 2024-10924, CVSS scored 9.8. The issue is described as an authentication bypass that allows an unauthenticated attacker to log in as any user, including an administrator. According to Defiant, the security defect exists because of an improper user check error handling in the plugin's two-factor REST API action. Specifically, the bug is triggered in two-factor authentication, so 2FA is enabled, formerly known as Really Simple SSL, and used by more than 4 million WordPress sites. The Really Simple security plugin enables site administrators to add various security features, including 2FA, login protections, vulnerability detections, and more. The critical vulnerability was identified in one of the features, adding 2FA, which was insecurely implemented. Explains. Sorry, scrolling up here. The function does not handle an error returned when a user verification fails, resulting in the user being authenticated based on the supplied ID, even if the identification has not been verified. Ultimately, this makes it possible for threat actors to bypass authentication and gain access to arbitrary accounts on sites running a vulnerable version of the plugin, Defiant explains. Successful exploitation of CVE 2024-1092-4 and other authentication bypass flaws that provide access to high privileged accounts enable threat actors to easily compromise vulnerable WordPress sites and abuse them for further attack. And this comes from Security Week. Okay, there's a lot to break in here. Yeah, there's a lot here. So great, there's a big error. They're calling it a name that I would expect an astronomer to name a planet that hasn't ever been seen before. And there's some technical stuff here. So why don't you just break it down for take 2 seconds and actually break this down.
If you want to have strong security on your website, you probably need two-factor authentication. So that's the ability to, one factor is your password, and another factor would be, there could be lots of factors. A fingerprint could be another factor. In most cases, it's a separate device that you go and get a code from, or
they text you the code.
Yeah. Yep. This flaw meant that wasn't working. So on the 4 million websites that use this plugin to allow for their two-factor authentication, there was a method that people could use to log in without having the authentication. Now they still needed login credentials, so they would have still needed to actually gain access to the account through either phishing or a brute force attack of some kind. But if they were able to get the login information for the website, they could bypass the two-factor.
Right.
Now, what does that 4 million website figure mean? Well, it means that a bunch of websites were using this unsecured version of this plugin. It does not mean that all 4 million of those websites actually suffered a data breach or any kind of attack.
They're just vulnerable. They're just, hey, you're vulnerable.
Yes.
Cool. 4 million is a lot of websites.
4 million is a lot of websites. Yeah. What's fascinating about that is, of those 4 million websites, I would bet that a large portion will continue to be vulnerable to that attack, potentially for years, because of how many small businesses we see not updating their WordPress plugins on a regular basis. So they are using a plugin to increase the security of their website. Because of a flaw in that plugin, they are missing out on some of the security provided by it. The developers of the plugin have released an update to solve the vulnerability. And then some portion of those websites will not update and will miss out on that added security, and they're going to continue being vulnerable.
We see that all the time, by the way. Super common. You go into the back of someone's WordPress and there's a zillion plugins and
Yep. In our technology consulting, this is one of the most common things we've seen. We see businesses that have a WordPress website that was built by some developer they no longer have an active relationship with. Everything is out of date. We're not in a position to update it because it's not an ecosystem we're familiar with. It's someone else's plugin ecosystem. And if we update all the plugins, the entire website might break. So you've got businesses in a position where they're just letting vulnerabilities pile up because upgrading their plugins involves other risks, and no one understands how that whole ecosystem fits together. So what this means for us in a lot of cases is we end up building sites from the ground up and then just switching people over to an infrastructure that we know is current and know is secure. This particular plugin isn't one that's in our tech stack.
No.
So like if you had a website built by 2H Media, you don't need to worry about this plugin. We're not using it. If you've got someone else managing your website now, they might have installed it. So that would be a question for them, because we do see clients installing plugins that we didn't recommend once in a while. Not too many, but we get the occasional client that wants to really run with things and do them ourselves.
As a heads up, if we did have something go wrong with some of our tech stack, you wouldn't be finding out about it here. We would be calling you.
Oh yeah.
And sending you an email, and you would know very quickly from this guy, we need to have a chat. Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
So you're never going to find out news that negatively affects you
Through our stream.
through
No,
this.
no, that'd be crazy.
So like,
now that said,
make that very clear.
That said, even if we were using this plugin on our websites, this wouldn't be this wouldn't be cause for concern, right? Because we would just say, yep, the plugin's been updated to the latest version. They patched the security hole. You're a local Canadian business. The odds of some international hacker trying to gain access to your website relatively limited to begin with, and the window on which people could have used this vulnerability also relatively limited.
And that goes back to like, that's part of working with us.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to keep that infrastructure up to date. It's part of a website does need attention.
Yep.
And if you're not going to treat it like your storefront, if you're not going to sweep the floor every night, if you're going to let it go, bad things are going to happen.
Now, what should businesses take away regarding website security? This is actually the most interesting part of this whole conversation to me. No website is completely secure. And no website is completely secure forever. If you want to have the best security, you need a website that is carefully managed by people that are on payroll managing that website all the time. This is a great argument to use managed platforms like Shopify, where they've got like a massive infrastructure of people that are
every day
on the clock,
they are on
making
it
sure
every
that
day.
system runs the way it needs to. It's an e-commerce platform, so they're thinking about security for things like credit cards,
customer data, all that stuff.
Yeah. You know, with WordPress is a great platform, but if you're going and installing random third-party plugins, you have no idea how secure those are. You have no idea how well maintained those are. But then even in that best case scenario, even in that Shopify scenario where you've got like a very walled garden ecosystem where the Shopify App Store is the App Store and that's all vetted by Shopify and the platform is controlled by Shopify and you've got a lot of trust there, things like this can still happen. Big companies can be surprised, and then when they get on it, they roll out updates and they try to fix things. If you look at the CrowdStrike issue that happened a few months ago, when all those Windows computers went down,
that was managed software. They had people on the ground all the time. So it can still go wrong.
Yeah.
So
the reason I bring this up is we see like a lot of when we're looking at like RFPs from like local municipalities and things, we see a lot of companies saying, we need high security for the website. And I think a lot of people who are asking for it don't understand what they're actually asking for. Because it either means nothing or it means something impossible. Because there are basic security steps that like any web developer should be taking. I would say the web developers that installed really simple security for their clients did a good thing. Even though some of the functionality of that plugin had a window where it didn't work properly, they were still better off having that plugin and all of the benefits it provides overall, especially if they keep it up to date. And
it's the up to date part that's
right?
the problem.
But it also means that like, great, you install this software, that doesn't mean you're totally secure. It's better, but it's always an uphill battle. It means that you really still need to stay on your employees about things like phishing emails. Right? Because the best security to avoid someone being able to access your website because your two-factor's not working is for no one to have your passwords that's not supposed to.
Proper password management. Don't be writing your stuff down in a book. Don't be sharing stuff. Don't be sharing login information.
Don't be repeating passwords.
If you find a USB key in your parking lot, don't plug it into your computer.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not just free. We don't know where that's been. We don't do that stuff. So there's like a whole bunch of things that go into proper security. And normally now they're hacking people. Yeah. They're going to trick the person into doing anything. They're not going to hack the back end of Facebook. They're going to convince the person that, I'm the CEO, buy me a gift card, or I'm going to convince the person to do this. And not in this case. It's actually a flaw in the software. But again, regarding security, it's got to be more full featured than, hey, well, we've got an app that handles that, because that's one piece of a very large pie. So some tips, Aaron. Give us 3 tips.
Well, we just
kind of hit
hit a bunch of the core ones. But like the main takeaway to my mind though is, if you don't care about security, then that's fine. You don't care about security. Some websites, it's way more important than others. If you don't sell anything through your website, it's probably much less of an issue.
If you are a lawyer and you've got a simple website and it explains your services, there's no client portal, you're not accepting documents through it, it's just a website with information, there's not a whole lot that can go wrong. Yes, there are things that can go wrong, but like you're not gonna have customer
there's
data
some
information.
basics. So like in that case, I would ask my web developer, does my contact form store messages on the website? Or do they just get sent straight to the email? Because
that's a great question.
Because some contact forms store it on WordPress and then send it, and some just send it. And if you're a lawyer, you probably don't want the contents of those contact forms being potentially vulnerable because you have poor security on your WordPress site. So, what I was going to say, if there's a key takeaway from this, it's have a dialogue with your web developer about what makes sense for your business. And don't go in saying, oh, we need the most secure website in the world, or we don't care about security. Just have a conversation about some security features that are possible, what that could look like, and what the limitations of those features are. Because if you go to a web developer and you say, I want a website that's secure, and the web developer says to you, absolutely, I'll make you a website that's secure, and you don't understand the steps they're taking in order to create that security, number one, it's probably a lot less secure than you think it is, because nothing is perfectly secure. And number two, you probably don't have the policies in place that you require to patch the biggest security vulnerability of all, which is your team giving out information that they shouldn't be, or creating vulnerabilities through things like repeat passwords.
On top of the fact, your website ages fairly quickly. So what's secure today is not necessarily secure tomorrow. Yeah. And this is an ongoing battle. So if you really, really care about security, there should be ongoing budget to say, okay, great, here's the next thing that we care about. There should be a little bit of a roadmap around here's what needs to take place. We would never expect the client to say, here's what we actually need to do. It's like Aaron says, it's the dialogue.
Yeah.
If you just want a website and walk away with it, it is secure, and then 2 days later it is not.
Yep.
That's the way it goes. That's the way the world
works. You need
works.
to build a relationship with your web developer. You need to work with someone who's willing to have conversations with you and get to know your business.